Have you ever felt haunted? Not by someone who left, but by someone who was never really yours. A person with whom nothing truly happened, but whose absence echoes louder than any goodbye. This isn't just about him. It's about the life that never unfolded, the version of you that began to emerge, but was never fully born. CarlJung called this the unlived life, the fragments of your soul that didn't get to breathe, love, speak. These fragments don't disappear, they wait. And sometimes they return, wearing the face of someone you almost loved. Neville Goddard reminds us, imagination is not just a daydream, it is an emotional reality. What you felt, even if only inside, shaped your nervous system. Your body remembers, even if life went on. So the question is, was it about him? Or was he simply the mirror that held a part of you that never got to live? Maybe it's not that you can't let go of him. Maybe you're still waiting to become who you would have been in that story. Let's begin. There are connections that don't leave scars, they leave echoes. You find yourself thinking about someone who barely touched your life, not because they were your great love, but because they were the door to something that never opened. It wasn't even a relationship. There was no betrayal, no drama, no ending, just a silence that never turned into a story, a pause that never became a sentence. And yet, here you are, still feeling it, still checking memories that never existed, because it's not about missing him. It's about mourning the version of yourself that was about to emerge, the version of you that would have loved deeper, spoken braver, felt more alive, like a seed that sprouted under the soil but never broke through, and now whispers from beneath your everyday life. That whisper isn't madness, it's memory, not of what happened, but of what wanted to. There's a moment almost imperceptible when someone enters our life, or our imagination, and becomes more than a person. They become a symbol, a figure not of flesh, but of longing. And then when it fades or never begins, we feel ashamed. I made it up, we think. It wasn't real, but the psyche speaks in images, and sometimes it chooses a face to awaken what has long slept inside you. You didn't invent a fantasy, you projected an archetype, the lover, the healer, the one who sees you. CarlJung teaches that archetypes aren't fiction. They are inner truths wearing outer forms. When the soul begins to stir, it often chooses someone outside you to represent what has long been dormant within. That's why it felt so intense, so irrational. Because it wasn't just about them, it was about a myth, a sacred story, echoing from deep inside, like Psyche dreaming of Eros, not because he was hers, but because her soul was beginning to remember its hunger. Shaming yourself for the fantasy only deepens the silence around your soul's awakening. What if he was never the destination, but the spark that lit the path inward? There are absences that don't scream. They hum, quietly, persistently. And this kind of haunting doesn't come from what ended. It comes from what never began. Perhaps there was a moment, a look, a possibility, the start of something that never reached its middle. And now you stand at that invisible threshold again and again, not because you want to return, but because you never really left. They say, if it didn't happen, it wasn't meant to. But the psyche doesn't work that way. For the soul, what matters is not the event, but the transformation it promised. This isn't about rejection, it's about interruption. Something in you was becoming. Someone new was waking up, and the story was cut short. Now, there's a door, slightly open, forever glowing with the mystery of what if. And every time you think of him, it's not a memory you're chasing, it's a self you almost became. Like standing before a sacred gate that once called your name, and now echoes in dreams, asking, who were you becoming before the silence began? There are ties the world never sees, silent altars built in the heart, entire inner landscapes sculpted from a single encounter that never grew roots in reality. Even without touch, even without words, A connection formed, but not outside, inside. And now, even if he's gone, even if he never truly stayed, something sacred still lives in the architecture of your emotional world. People say, just stop thinking about him, as if forgetting could dismantle what the soul, in its silence, has constructed with reverence. But this isn't about obsession. It's about the cathedral your heart built around his symbol. A place where your longing, your hope, and your hidden self found voice. And even though he never entered, the walls still shimmer with meaning. This is the dissonance. The mind says, there was nothing, but the body remembers the prayers whispered in emotional solitude. He may never have known, but something real unfolded inside you, like building a sacred sanctuary for someone who was never present, yet the presence you felt was unmistakably real. The body does not speak in logic. It speaks in sensation, memory, vibration. It does not ask, did this happen? It only asks, did this feel real? And when you loved someone in silence, in dreams, in the depth of your imagination, your body believed it. It stored it. It lived it. That is why the longing persists. Because your nervous system danced to a rhythm that was never played aloud, but felt as vivid as a memory. People might say, you can't miss what you never had. But science and the soul know better. As Neville Goddard said, imagination is not fantasy, it is emotional creation. What you imagined with feeling became real to your being. And so your body aches for something it never touched. Not because it was delusional, but because it was inhabited emotionally. Like a dancer who never stepped on stage, yet rehearsed the same choreography each night in her dreams. Her muscles remember. This is not madness. It is muscle memory of the soul. A tenderness that once stretched through your chest and left behind the echo of a love that never unfolded, but was felt completely. There are stories that don't end, not because they continue, but because they never truly began. He may have walked away, or never stepped in, but something in you remained suspended, not in love, but in becoming. He became more than a person. He became the stage upon which a new version of you was ready to emerge, softer, braver, more whole. And when the connection dissolved before it could root, so did she, the you that only existed in the possibility of that love. It wasn't just about him. It was about who you started to become in his presence, the way your soul stirred, the way your voice wanted to be heard, but it was interrupted, and now you walk through life feeling slightly fragmented, like a dream half remembered, or a song that ends before the chorus. CarlJung might say, this is the shadow of a self unexpressed. And like Inanna, the ancient goddess who began her descent into the underworld but never completed it, you are still half above, half below, half here, half waiting, not for him to return, but for yourself, the version who never got to fully live. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. There are connections that do not return, yet their narrative still holds you. Not because you believe he was the one, but because the story that surrounded him still breathes within you. A story of a love that awakens, a connection that transforms, a meeting that makes everything make sense, and so you don't cling to the man, you cling to the myth, to the script your soul was writing through him. Letting go, they say, is the only way forward. But sometimes the soul doesn't need to let go of the image. It needs to extract the essence. What was that version of love offering? What part of you was trying to awaken? Because it was never about possession. It was about permission, to feel more, to live wider, to believe again that something sacred could happen through intimacy. You aren't stuck because you miss him. You're tethered to the storyline your spirit still wants to embody, like trying to hold onto a dream, not because you refuse to wake, but because the dream showed you something real, something tender, something true. And maybe it's not about forgetting him. Maybe it's about drinking the meaning from the dream. and becoming what it was trying to reveal. Time passes, faces fade, but some feelings do not dissolve, they distill, because what remains unlived does not disappear, it becomes shadow, not to haunt you with regret, but to remind you of what still longs to be born. CarlJung warned us, what we refuse to live will return disguised as fate, not to punish, but to awaken, not to repeat, but to complete. And that is what this ache is, not a sign of weakness, but a call from the fragment you left behind. People say, time heals everything, but the soul knows. Time only hides what we haven't yet embraced. This is not nostalgia, it's not illusion, it's a soul echo, like a ghost that wanders the halls of an unfinished house, not to stay, but to be released, to be seen, to be given the closure it never received. He was never the answer, but he was the doorway, and the part of you that stood before it still waits. Not for him, but for you. You are not broken. You are in contact with something unfinished, not unreal, but unlived. This ache you carry is not madness, it is memory, a soul memory of a path that called your name and was never walked, so stop trying to erase him. His presence in your heart is no longer about him, it's about the temple your spirit built around what he symbolized. This wasn't about having him, it was about meeting a part of you that only emerged in his reflection. Let that version of you speak now. Let her say what was never said. Let her feel what was never felt. Not to go back, but to integrate, to gather the pieces, to walk forward with what was true, even if only within. Honor the self who stood at that threshold, the one who opened, who softened, who dared to feel. She is still here. She has always been waiting. Jung reminds us, what we do not live becomes our fate. Neville Goddard whispers, what we imagine with feeling becomes part of who we are. So maybe he was never yours to hold, because he was always yours to awaken, not as a partner, but as a portal, a symbol, a silent promise of the life still waiting to be lived inside you. If you made it this far, comment, Estoy despierta. Your soul knows why, and it's listening.